The Gospels have a pretty broad story of Jesus kind of attacking the scribes and the Pharisees, the elders of the people, for a variety of reasons. He calls them out for hypocrisy, their double standards. When they came after him because he was healing people on the Sabbath and they were claiming he was violating Sabbath law, and he'd say, hey, we all know that if you had your own livestock fall into a pit on a Sunday or on the Sabbath, you'd go rescuing them anyway. So use your proper judgment and common sense across the board. If it works for you, it should be working for other people as well. There's other times when Jesus comes out and blames them for abuse of their power, claiming that they set up heavy loads for people to carry and do nothing to really help them. In today's gospel, Jesus goes a little bit deeper and calls them out for missing the point, suggesting that they've somehow missed out on what the message of God is all about. Not only did they not share it with other people, they themselves didn't tap into the goodness that's there. That's a pretty bold claim, but something that we all need to think about. Earlier this summer, when we were at a conference, Father Michael Schmidt had a rhetorical question for an audience that was largely the movers and shakers of parish life from across the nation, and said, what would be the point to win all these souls for the kingdom of God if you yourself lose your own soul in the process? It was a rhetorical question. I don't think that anyone in the room was in the danger of losing their salvation, but the point that he was trying to make was, as people invested in trying to spread the gospel message, have we somehow lost the spark, the first love, if you will? And it's easy to do when we face frustrations and obstinance and bureaucracy. It's easy to get the edge dulled up a bit. But it's a valid point to say, did we get the spark? Is that our driving point that we're trying to sell? Or somehow have we lost things in our messaging? Scholars of the law are very good at articulating a language, a vessel, if you will, a conveyance of some form that's supposed to convey the grace and spirit of God. And sometimes we kind of confuse the vehicle with the contents. And so if we've lost the contents of the Spirit of God, all we do is we keep pushing out the messaging without getting the actual message underneath it. And I think that that's a viable challenge for even us today. What Jesus said of the scribes and the Pharisees is probably very close to what he might say today to the structures that are in place to bring about the messaging of God, spreading of the gospel. But more importantly, I think the question is, have we been kind of like the scribes and the Pharisees, that we've not necessarily tapped into or have forgotten that spark, that first love? And if so, maybe we need to kind of revisit that. If we're wringing our hands and saying, oh, the decline of the church is going on and we don't know what to do about it, as opposed to keep pushing the same thing that doesn't seem to be tripping the trigger for people, we have to consider, what's the spark behind it? And that's not so easily learned and not so easily conveyed. Supposing there's an art teacher that studied under some great master and knows all the techniques, and all they ever do to bring to the classroom is, well, you mix these two colors to get that color. You use this brush in that circumstance. This is what you're supposed to do for a composition. They might learn the technical components, but they might not ever develop a love of the art, the whole point of why you're doing these things. And sometimes I think the church has become like the tenured professor that no longer studies the topic out of interest for themselves, but continues to push the same curriculum year after year and gets frustrated with students that question, shouldn't we be looking at it a different way, a newer way? Is this the only way of doing it? And so I think that we as a church need to consider what Jesus says to the scribes and the Pharisees, to question for ourselves, have we picked up what is important to us? And have we been able to articulate it well enough for others? The vacancies in the pews kind of indicates that we're probably not doing as good a job as we could. Part of it is the grace of God. I mean, we could get it all right, and it is still God embedded in the experiences and the lives of people that brings about a faith. But if we're not on fire in a way that we share it with others, odds are we're not doing as good a job as we could.